Good evening, class and professor. My name is Robin Bowman, and I am conducting my country briefing presentation on the country Australia. Please enjoy. To begin, I'm just going to give you a little background about the country Australia. Australia is the sixth largest country in the world. It accounts for 6% of the world's land area. It is the world's smallest continent by landmass, but it's the largest island in the world. Australia is the flattest and driest continent in the world. Its neighboring countries are East Timor, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Indonesia, New Zealand, and Vanuatu. The capital of Australia is Canberra, and its urban area is Sydney. Australia populates over 24 million people. Australia is considered the Down Under, and that is because it's located in the Southern Hemisphere. It is the largest English-speaking country in the Southern Hemisphere. The language was caused by the Industrial Revolution. Um, It was caused by the Industrial Revolution when tens of thousands destitute farm workers from Kent, Australia, Anglia, and Essex went into East End of London searching for work. They linked with the Dockland people, street traders, hawkers, and artisans who were driven out of the city and West End by the middle and upper class. This hybrid population crowded in the 18th century slums, crossing their rural and urban traditions that created racy, witty vocal type of street language. Australian language, like the American Black English, was created over 200 years ago. It had its first origins when they were at sea. The officers and crew of the slave ships on the long voyage to America had to communicate with their charges in Pidgin, which is communication between people not sharing a common language, which was a mixture of basic English and several African languages, which gave an unalterable direction of Black English. Cockney, which is a mixture of Irish and Northern dialect, the fusions of accents, grammar, and syntax form the basis of penal colony speech as they stepped ashore in New South Wales and Queensland. Swear words and vulgar expressions were abundant and expected under the circumstances. They developed picturesque Cockney rhyming slang, which remains one of the fascinating features of Australian English. For example, AUD cologne is a phone, trouble and strife is a wife, Bugs Bunny is considered money. Not only did the Australians develop Cockney language, but they also developed language known as Outback, which many of us have heard. This speech was added to their language as well. The Outback speech, or what's called the Bush, had two main elements: the Aborigine and the frontier inventions. From the Aborigines, which is the original people of the land, earliest known to the land, came words as such as boomerang, kangaroo, wombat, koala, jumback, jumbuck, dingo, and dingo. The frontier language is basically it's more humorous. The language created words such as digger, and digger is in Australia, and amber, which is beer. And later on, you'll see those are two important words, especially amber. Australia is still undergoing lots of changes. Lewis discusses the claims how it is a classist society. So language is also classless. So all classes, well, there's no classes, so everyone uses the same language, Cockney and Bush. And there's no class pressure on one way of speaking in Australia. Everyone in Australia is refers to each other as a mate, and women are called love. Australians are very sympathetic to the weak. So you'll see here I have a divided flag, and basically the bottom right is the flag used by the Aborigines, and the other flag is Australian flag. That if you were to Google, you will see this flag. And there's a picture of an Aborigine. If you have some time, you can research Aborigines of Australia. So if you're a leader in America and you would like to conduct business in Australia, you basically need to take some Aussie 101. Google it, go on YouTube. You need to understand the basic language before you travel over to Australia, because the language, even though they speak English, the language is pretty different. So when you travel to Australia, you better know that Aussie means Australian, in an Australian. Mate is an Australian friend. As I said just a couple moments ago, everyone is considered a mate. Everybody is considered a friend. Um, if someone says good day, they're basically saying hello. If somebody is saying, how are you going? They are saying, how are you? If someone says good on ya, it's basically an expression of approval. If someone says I'm stuffed, like Americans, we say I'm stuffed when we're referring to being full after eating. They may also say this, but they are also saying that they're tired or they're in trouble. No worries. They're saying you're welcome or relax. So you need to understand a little bit about Australian government and before you would lead in their country. In 1890, colonies met to form a national government similar to the United States, but they opted to retain the Westminster, which is the UK model, for the legislative, the executive government, and judiciary at the state and national level. Australia was declared a federation in 1901. Now, as a federal government, 6 governments and 2 territories that are legally self-governing. Federal government has a power over defense, foreign affairs, trade and commerce, taxation, customs, and exercise duties, pensions, immigration, and postal services. The Constitution vests the executive powers of government in a governor general representing Queen Elizabeth II of England, who also is the Queen of Australia, but they are exercised on behalf of the elected government. In terms of the economy in Australia, it is a mixed market economy. It's less capitalist than the U.S., but it has more safety nets, so people are less likely to be left out on the streets. They have less corporate chains than America does. They are more family-owned businesses in Australia. With technology, it has made Australia remote. There are over 100 companies that run their business out of Australia. Now that you have a little background about Australia's government, it's important to understand their system. Their systems and their behaviors are very important when conducting business. So as a leader, you cannot ignore them because they are highly respected. Um, they abide by a egalitarian system. As a foreigner, you need not to ever threaten that egalitarian system. They consider everyone to be treated equally, regardless of wealth, education, or background. So everyone there is in the same class. They're a classless system. There are certain topics that are safe, and then there are certain topics that are considered dangerous. Um, Typically, all of topics surrounding sports are pretty safe. They love criticizing themselves, but they are poor at receiving criticism. They do not respond well to agreeing and to enthusiastically agreeing to enthusiastically. They find this distrustful. If you are too persistent, they will tell you to go back to where you came from. They do not like a lot of praise because it raises expectation. They do not like pressure as well. They do not like they do not show too much pride in they don't like when you show too much pride, I'm sorry, in your own nationality. They want you to respect their nationality. And they also they show respect for their prime minister. However, they still, with their classist society, they find it humorous when their prime minister gets booed, and also that Australians do not know all the words to the national anthem. Furthermore, I think it's important to know that they have a cynical view when it comes to valuing people of power. They basically do not value people of power or with wealth. Um, they have more respect for the what they call the battler, the person that is fighting rather than the person that is the winner. There's a dark side to Australia as well. They are known for consuming a lot of alcohol, and they have a high problem, increased problem with people taking painkillers than any other English speaking country in the world. In addition to this, there is a lot of racial policies that are largely unsuccessful, and that stems back to the Aborigines. So let's talk about communication, since that is going to be key to conducting business with Australians or any country, in fact. But you need to understand how they communicate. Australians communicate on a low context, explicit manner, which means they are direct. They are good communicators. They're precise. Their communication is simple and it's clear, but they do provide direct negative feedback. When it comes to persuasion on the scale, they tend to fall they tend to fall towards the right of the scale, where application is first in their culture. They are trained to begin with the facts and the statements or the opinion, and then they'll address the concept later. They'll take the explanation later. And I think this largely depends on their roots. Um, they pretty much want people to cut through the red tape. They're a laissez-faire attitude. They have no worries. Everything will all work out. And with the application first, they like practical examples. So decision making actually was not discussed for the Australians in Aaron Myers, but it was mentioned that they are more consensual when it comes to deciding. So if I had to guess, then I would say that they were more with the capital D. The decisions are made in groups, since they do not respect people who are cutthroat with authority. If you ride too high, they will cut you down. This is called the tall poppy syndrome. With the capital D, everyone in this culture is consulted, and I see this with the Australians. The decision may take longer. The implementation will be quite rapid. So, as a leader, understanding that their cultural is more consensual, I will make sure that I demonstrate more patience and commitment. Australians have an issue with trust, so they like to know that they can trust you. So, I will check in with them regularly. I will cultivate an informal context with the Australians, and this might also be with mixing business with pleasure. Okay, so communicating with the Aussies on the trusting scale, Australians are more task based versus relationship based. It is easy for them to move in and out of business relationships. So, because of this, I kind of was on the fence whether they were more coconut or if they were more peachy. Myers did not mention whether they were either or. Australians tend to be friendly, but because they can move from one relationship to another when conducting business. I decided that they were more on the coconut side. They let their hair down and they have a good attitude, but I think they're more on the hard side when terms of building relationships. They would like for you to actually build a type of relationship with them, and you have to sit with them and you have to socialize with them. I don't believe like with the peachy culture, there's like these little icebreakers. They actually want to build deep relationships with you. So if the relationship, a business relationship with someone, whether it was unsatisfactory, I think that they can move on to another relationship because they basically found that the relationship was unsatisfactory. So I think they would then think that the personal relationship also was unsatisfactory. In terms of disagreements, Australians are definitely more confrontational. This goes back to their language. Their language is very explicit, vulgar, witty. They have a lot of humor, so they like to give criticism. So I think that they definitely do not mind confronting their disagreements. However, you don't take their disagreements personal. They are able um, to separate the disagreement and the feedback from the actual personal relationship, and the personal relationship is unharmed. So I thought that they fall. Actually, it's mentioned. I'm sorry that they fall in quadrant A. So just to wrap things up, as a leader, I think that it's very possible to have successful business interactions with Australians. You definitely need to do Aussie 101. There's simple things that you need to keep in mind when conducting business with them and traveling to their country. Richard Lewis has a list of what he calls the motivating factors. Um, One of the first things that he mentions is just becoming one of the mates. And I said mates is basically means a friend. Don't be so law abiding. You also need to respect the egalitarian system, and everybody there is classless. They do not respect you being cheap. They are very open to spending. You need to party with your business partners. They do mix business with pleasure. So expect that. You also need to expect to roll up your sleeves. Like I said, they're a classless society. So they believe that you shouldn't ask anybody to do a job that you yourself wouldn't do. If you need to get your hands dirty and do something, they believe that you should just roll up your sleeves. And then you just need to understand the language. You need to take jokes. You need to be able to give a joke here and there. You need to be able to understand that swearing is not taboo. They will swear. So in the end, I think if you understand some of those basic um, behaviors, you'll be able to conduct business with the Australians. All right. Good day, mates. Thank you.